$500, the sheriff repeated slowly, tapping the newspaper with his finger, for a wife. The saloon in Ashford went quiet. Men leaned closer. Cards were forgotten. A woman near the bar crossed herself. Someone laughed first, then another. "Who's desperate enough to pay that?" a rancher scoffed. "Who's desperate enough to go?" Another answered. The advertisement sat in the center of the Rocky Mountain Sentinel, printed in cold black ink that made it feel official, inescapable. Seeking wife. Must be unwanted by others, appearance irrelevant, character essential. Will pay $500 to family for suitable woman, no refunds. Contact the Raven, Shadow Peak. The name alone sucked the air out of the room. Shadow Peak, a place people avoided even in daylight. Everyone in Colorado territory knew the story. 10 years earlier, a mine explosion tore through that mountain like a cannon blast. 17 men died screaming in the dark. One man survived, Nathaniel Crow. They said the fire melted his face. That bone showed through skin. That one eye was gone, the other ruined. They said he wrapped his head in leather and vanished into the mountains, taking his guilt and his madness with him. Children whispered about the monster of Shadow Peak. Hunters swore they'd seen him watching from the trees. Travelers avoided the pass altogether, and now that monster wanted a wife. "Appearance irrelevant," a man snorted. "That's monster talk if I've ever heard it." Laughter erupted again. Across town, in a narrow farmhouse, sagging under debt and disappointment, Beatrice Hendricks stitched a ripped sleeve by lamplight and listened to her parents talk about her as if she were already gone. "She's nearly 30, her father said. "No prospects, no suitors, no dowry worth the paper it's written on." "She eats like a hired man and argues like one too," her stepmother added. "No one wants a woman like that." Beatrice did not look up. She had learned long ago that silence hurt less than protest. Her body had always been a crime in this house. Too large, too solid, too visible. At nearly 300 pounds, she took up space her family resented, space they could no longer afford. Then her father unfolded the newspaper. $500, he said, awe creeping into his voice. That would save the farm. Beatrice's needle paused. "You're joking," she said. "No," he replied. "I'm being practical." Her stepmother's eyes were sharp. "You'd finally be useful." The words landed clean and cruel. "You want to sell me," Beatrice said slowly, "to a man people call a monster." Her father would not meet her eyes. "You want to stay here forever, watching your brothers starve because no one will marry you? And if he kills me?" "He won't," her stepmother said briskly. "The ad says character matters." Beatrice laughed once, short and bitter. "So I'm ugly enough to qualify." Silence followed, heavy, telling. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Inside, Beatrice felt something settle in her chest, not fear, not anger, resignation. She thought of the future her family offered her, unpaid labor, whispered insults, a slow erasure that would end with her buried behind the barn and barely mourned. Then she thought of Shadow Peak, of a monster who wanted a wife no one else wanted. "At least," she said quietly, "with him, I'll be unwanted on my own terms." Her father looked up, startled. "I'll go," Beatrice said. "But when you take that money, don't pretend this is kindness." No one argued. That night, as Ashford slept, Beatrice lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man paid $500 for a woman the world had already discarded. And somewhere high on Shadow Peak, behind a leather mask and a ruined face, Nathaniel Crow folded the same newspaper and waited. When the world decides someone has no value, it is always eager to sell them. What it never expects is that the one who buys them might see something everyone else refused to look for. Ashford did not keep secrets well. By morning, everyone knew who the $500 were for. Beatrice Hendricks felt the change before anyone said her name. At the well, conversations paused when she approached. At the mercantile, a woman stared openly at her body, then leaned close to whisper. A boy laughed and said, "She'll break the monster's bed." No one corrected him. Her father walked beside her through town, shoulders straighter than she had ever seen them. The weight of debt had lifted from him, replaced by something colder than relief. Pride. "Best deal I ever made." A farmer clapped Martin Hendricks on the back. "Didn't think anyone would pay that much for a girl like her." Beatrice kept her eyes forward. At the bank, the clerk counted the coins slowly, deliberately loud. $500 in gold had a particular sound, final, irrevocable. "That monster must be desperate," the clerk said with a grin, "or blind." "Both, from what I hear," another man chimed in. Laughter followed Beatrice out the door. By noon, the town had decided to make a spectacle of it. Someone suggested the saloon. Someone else brought whiskey. By evening, Beatrice was summoned downstairs, told to stand, while men who had never once looked at her with kindness debated her worth like livestock. "Too fat for most men," one said. "Too mouthy," another added. "She'll suit him fine," the sheriff concluded, tipping his hat. "Monster deserves monster." Her stepmother sculled thinly. "At least she won't embarrass us any more." Beatrice stood there, face burning, hands clenched at her sides. She had imagined this moment would break her. It did not. What broke instead was something older, some last fragile hope that dignity might be given if she waited long enough. She did not cry. She memorized their faces. When the wagon came the next morning, it did not wait. The driver would not meet her eyes. He took her single trunk, lashed it down, and climbed to his seat. Her father pressed a gloved hand into hers. Brief, awkward, connectional. "You'll be provided for," he said. "That's more than most women get." She pulled her hand free. "Don't pretend you did this for me." He flinched, then turned away. The road out of Ashford was lined with people. Some came out of curiosity, some out of cruelty, a few out of relief that it was not their daughter being sent away. "She'll do," someone called. "Good riddance." "Hope the monster likes big meals." Beatrice climbed into the wagon without looking back. The mountains swallowed the town quickly. Fields gave way to forest. The air grew colder, thinner, sharper with pine and stone. The road narrowed into a path that twisted upward, forcing the wagon to slow. With every mile, the voices of Ashford faded. With every mile, the silence grew heavier. By late afternoon, Shadow Peak loomed ahead, dark, massive, crowned with cloud. Beatrice felt it then, not fear, anticipation. The cabin emerged at dusk, solid and unmistakably intentional. This was no lair, no ruin. Smoke curled from the chimney. Light glowed through clean windows. The driver swallowed hard. "This is as far as I go." The door opened before Beatrice could knock. The man who stepped out filled the doorway. He was taller than she expected, broader, wrapped in black wool and leather-like armor. His face was completely hidden behind a dark mask, fitted precisely to human contours, yet unmistakably inhuman for its lack of expression. Only his eyes showed through narrow openings, gray, sharp, watching. "Beatrice Hendricks," he said. His voice was deep, controlled. "You came." She lifted her chin. "I said I would." The driver nearly ran back to the wagon. For a moment, they simply stood there, two figures shaped by rejection, measuring each other in silence. Then the masked man stepped aside. "Come inside," he said. "You'll freeze out here." The cabin was warm, not cluttered, not barren. Purposeful. Books lined the walls. Tools were cleaned and stored with care. Everything spoke of order, discipline, and time spent alone thinking. "This is Nathaniel Crow," he said, removing his gloves, but not the mask. "You may call me Nathaniel." Beatrice set down her trunk. "People call you worse." "Yes." He paused. "Do you believe them?" "I believe people like to name what they're afraid of." Something in his posture shifted, almost imperceptibly. "We need to be clear," Nathaniel said. "I paid for your freedom from Ashford, not your obedience. You will not be struck. You will not be forced. You will not be mocked in this house." "And the mask?" she asked. "That stays." "Always?" "Yes." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine." "Fine?" His tone held surprise. "I've lived my whole life being seen as something unpleasant," Beatrice said. "If this mask helps you survive, I won't tear it away just to satisfy curiosity." Nathaniel looked at her. Really looked. "You're not what I expected," he said. She laughed once, softly. "No one ever says that like it's a good thing." He inclined his head. "It is." That night, as Beatrice lay alone in her room, listening to the mountain wind and the steady presence of another human being under the same roof, she realized something unsettling. For the first time, she was not the most unwanted person in the house. Public humiliation leaves scars no fire can burn. But sometimes being sent away from cruelty is the first step toward learning that survival itself can be an act of defiance. The mountain did not welcome Beatrice. It tested her. Morning broke pale and cold, light sliding over Shadow Peak like a blade. Nathaniel was already awake when she came downstairs, masked, boots laced, a pot of coffee steaming on the stove. "We'll go higher today," he said. "The supply cabin." She hesitated. "How far?" "Far enough that you'll feel it," he replied, not unkindly. "But I won't push you past your limit." That was the first rule she learned about him. He did not promise ease. He promised honesty. They set out after breakfast. The trail narrowed quickly, trading packed dirt for stone and snow-crusted roots. The air grew thinner. Beatrice's breath came harder than she liked, her body heavy with effort and old shame whispering that she was too big, too slow, too much. Nathaniel noticed without comment. When she stumbled, he slowed. When her cheeks flushed, he stopped for water. When the cold cut through her gloves, he handed her his spare pair and turned his back so she could change without embarrassment. No speeches, no pity, just action. By midday, the wind rose sharp and relentless. Beatrice's legs burned, her lungs ached. She wanted to ask him to turn back, but something stubborn, something long denied, refused to let her surrender. "I can make it," she said when he glanced at her. I know, Nathaniel replied. I wouldn't have brought you if you couldn't. That answer warmed her more than the coat. They reached the supply cabin by afternoon. It sat wedged against a rock face, sturdy and plain, stocked with preserved food and tools. Nathaniel set to work immediately, checking seals and inventory. Beatrice followed suit without being asked. She discovered she liked the work, the simplicity, the clarity of tasks with visible purpose. As the sun dipped, the temperature dropped fast. "We'll stay the night," Nathaniel said. "Storm's coming." Beatrice nodded, trusting him without questioning how he knew. He always seemed to know. Inside the cabin, the cold pressed in. Nathaniel lit the stove, his movements efficient, practiced. Soon the space filled with heat and the smell of soup. Beatrice sat on a rough bench, muscles trembling from the day's exertion. Nathaniel set a bowl in her hands first. "Eat," he said. "You need it." She noticed then he always made sure she ate before he did. "Why?" she asked quietly. He paused. "Because no one ever did that for me." The soup was thick and salty and perfect. As night settled, the storm arrived in earnest. Wind battered the walls. Snow hissed against the windows. The world beyond the cabin vanished. Nathaniel laid out blankets. "There's one bed," he said stiffly. "I can take the floor." Beatrice studied his tense posture. "We can share it. To sleep, nothing else." He hesitated, then nodded once. "If you're sure." They lay side by side, not touching at first, the mattress narrow and unforgiving. The wind roared. The cabin creaked. After a while, Beatrice shifted closer without thinking. Nathaniel went still. "Is this all right?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "I just haven't shared space in a long time." "Neither have I," she admitted. Their shoulders brushed. Heat bled between them, human, grounding. "I was afraid of you," Beatrice said, suddenly staring at the ceiling. "So was everyone," he replied. "I'm not anymore." He turned his head slightly, mask catching the low light. "Why?" she considered. "Because monsters don't notice when someone's gloves are too thin, or stop when someone needs to breathe." Silence followed, then quietly, "Thank you." She slept deeply, the storm fading into a distant roar. The next days followed a rhythm. They worked, they walked, they rested. Nathaniel never rushed her. When her knees ached, he adjusted the pace. When she carried more than she should, he took the heavier load without comment. Trust grew not in declarations, but in shared effort. One evening, back at the main cabin, Beatrice found a new bench by the door, lower, sturdier, built for her height and weight. "You made this?" she said. "Yes, for me." "Yes." He looked almost embarrassed. She sat testing it, solid, unyielding. "Thank you," she said, and meant more than the bench. As weeks passed, Beatrice changed. Her body grew stronger, not smaller, but steadier. Her breath deepened. Her steps gained confidence. She stopped apologizing when she took up space. Nathaniel noticed. "You move differently," he said one night. "I feel different," she replied. "Useful." He shook his head. "You were always useful. You just weren't allowed to be." The words settled into her bones. They spoke more now, about books, about the mine, about the men who died. Nathaniel never hid from the truth, never painted himself blameless. "I made mistakes," he said once, voice flat. "They cost lives." "And you live with," Beatrice said. "Yes." "That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you human." He did not answer. But that night he left his mask on the table while he played the piano, the music low and aching. Beatrice listened from the doorway, heart tight with something like awe. She realized then that the mask was not his prison. Fear was. And slowly, step by careful step, they were walking out of it together. Trust is not built in warm rooms or easy days. It is forged on cold paths, in shared silence, where a steady pace speaks louder than any promise. Warmth did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, the way fire does when a cabin has been cold for too long. First a crackle, then a glow, then the steady assurance that the dark would not win tonight. Beatrice learned the cabin by touch and routine, the way the floorboard near the hearth complained if stepped on too hard, the rhythm of the kettle when it was about to boil, the place on the table where Nathaniel always set his gloves, aligned with careful precision. He rose before dawn. She joined him by the third morning. "You don't have to," he said when he saw her tying her boots. "I want to," she replied. That answer seemed to satisfy him more than any explanation could. They worked side by side without ceremony. Beatrice cooked hearty meals and learned quickly what supplies stretched the farthest through winter. Nathaniel repaired tools, mended fences, reinforced the roof where snow had begun to sag the beams. When she struggled to lift something heavy, he stepped in, not with a sigh or a comment, just a quiet redistribution of weight. One afternoon she returned from the spring with aching arms to find a simple pulley system installed above the bucket. "For the water," he said, as if it were nothing. She stared at it. "You built this? Today?" "Yes." "So I wouldn't hurt myself?" "Yes." No one had ever altered the world to accommodate her before. They had only asked her to shrink. That night she cried quietly into her pillow, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar ache of being considered. Nathaniel never commented on her body, not its size, not its strength, not the way it filled space unapologetically. He treated it as fact, not flaw. When he built furniture, he built it solid. When he planned meals, he planned generously. When he taught her to split wood, he adjusted the stance, not the expectation. "Plant your feet wider," he said once. "Your weight is an advantage. Use it." The words landed like permission. By the second month, Beatrice stopped turning sideways in doorways. By the third, she stopped apologizing when she sat down. Evenings became their own quiet ritual. Supper, dishes, reading by the fire. Sometimes Nathaniel played the piano, low, thoughtful melodies that filled the cabin with something almost holy. Other nights, they spoke of nothing at all. One night, Beatrice asked, "Why did you specify unwanted in the advertisement?" Nathaniel did not look up from the book he was repairing. "Because wanted people leave," he said. "Unwanted people stay. They know what it costs to be alone." She understood too well. Another night, she asked, "Do you miss who you were before the explosion?" He paused a long time before answering, "I miss being unafraid of mirrors." She nodded, saying nothing more. The first real test came with visitors. 2 trappers arrived late one afternoon, seeking shelter from an early snow. Nathaniel hesitated only a moment before letting them in. Their eyes went to Beatrice first, then to Nathaniel's mask. An uncomfortable silence followed. "That your wife?" one asked, blunt and rude. "Yes," Nathaniel replied. "She's big," the man said, not bothering to soften it. Beatrice braced herself. Nathaniel did not. "She's capable," he said evenly, "and she's mine. You'll speak with respect or you'll leave." The trapper flushed. Didn't mean you did, Nathaniel said. Choose your next words carefully. They did. Later, after the men had gone to sleep in the outer room, Beatrice sat stiffly by the fire. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, he replied, I did. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw something new beneath the mask. Pride. Not possessive, not performative, protective. Winter deepened. Snow sealed them in for days at a time. Isolation pressed close, but this time it did not suffocate. They cooked together, played cards, argued gently over books, laughed. Quiet, surprised laughter that felt almost foreign. One evening, as wind rattled the windows, Beatrice spoke without thinking. I'm not embarrassed to be seen with you. Nathaniel's hands stilled on the piano keys. I know what people think, she continued, about your face, about my body, about this marriage. He turned toward her, one eye searching. And I don't care, she said, not anymore. Something shifted then, not a dramatic moment, not a confession, a settling. That night, when she reached for him in bed, not for desire but for reassurance, he did not hesitate. He wrapped an arm around her, careful and warm, his masked face turned toward her hair. I'm glad you're here, he said softly. So am I. Days passed, weeks. Spring hinted at its return, slow and tentative. Snow melted into rivulets that sang down the mountainside. Beatrice's body moved with ease now, strong from work, unburdened by constant shame. She caught her reflection one morning in the small mirror by the wash basin. She did not flinch. That realization stole her breath. One afternoon, Nathaniel came in from the mine early, face pale beneath the mask. Sit, he said. She obeyed. He knelt in front of her, carefully checking her hands. You're bleeding. She looked down. A small cut she hadn't noticed. You work too hard, he said. So do you. Yes, he agreed, but I don't want this life to cost you your health. The concern in his voice was unmistakable. She placed her hand over his. It's already given me more than I thought possible. That night, she touched the edge of his mask. He did not pull away. Not yet, he murmured. I know, she said. I just wanted to see if you'd let me. He did. Just that much. Just enough. Healing does not arrive with grand gestures. It comes in small mercies. A chair built to fit, a voice raised in defense, a hand that does not withdraw, and slowly the heart learns it is safe to take up space. The past did not arrive all at once. It crept closer on paper and rumor, on the breath of men who had never climbed Shadow Peak but felt entitled to what lay upon it. The first sign was a letter. It came with the spring trader, sealed with Ashford's familiar mark. Beatrice recognized her father's handwriting instantly. The sight of it tightened something low in her stomach. She did not open it right away. Nathaniel watched from across the table, his mask resting beside his plate. Something he only did now, inside the cabin, where the walls had learned their truth. You don't have to read it, he said. I do, she replied. If I don't, it reads me anyway. The letter was polite. That was the worst part. It spoke of concern, of regret, of whispers spreading through town about the nature of her marriage. It mentioned the money, how some were saying it was not a bride price, but proof of coercion. It hinted that certain officials were beginning to ask questions. "Your situation may not be as secure as you believe," her father had written. "We only want what is best for you." Beatrice folded the letter neatly. "They're coming," she said. Nathaniel did not ask who. He rose, went to the cabinet, and withdrew a ledger bound in cracked leather. He placed it on the table between them. "I should have told you sooner," he said, "but I needed to know if you'd stay even after hearing it." "Hearing what?" "The explosion wasn't just an accident," Nathaniel said quietly. "Not entirely." Beatrice felt the room narrow around them. "Go on." "The mine owners cut corners. I knew it. I argued. I documented it." He tapped the ledger. "But when the pressure came, from investors, from men with power, I didn't shut the mine down. I told myself it was temporary, that nothing would happen." His voice tightened. Then it did. 17 men, 17 families. "I survived because I was closest to the exit," he continued. "That fact alone made me unforgivable, to them and eventually to myself." "You weren't charged," Beatrice said. "No. The owners paid to make it go away, but guilt doesn't need a court." She reached for his hand. He let her. "And now?" "Now the railroad wants this land," he said. "Shadow Peak sits on a route they've wanted for years. Your father's sudden concern is not coincidence." Beatrice's jaw set. "So I was a bargain twice over." "No," Nathaniel said sharply. "You were never part of that calculation. You were the risk." She met his gaze. "Good. I've been underestimated my whole life." The second sign came in person. 2 riders appeared one afternoon, stopping just short of the tree line. They did not dismount. They did not wave. Nathaniel watched them through the window. "Surveyors," he said, "or men pretending to be." Beatrice stepped onto the porch beside him, shoulders scoured. "They won't come closer," she said. "How do you know?" "Because they want us scared," she replied. "Fear makes people sloppy." The riders left before sunset. The third sign was louder. A notice posted at the Ashford courthouse questioned the legality of marriages conducted under financial inducement. Another called for a review of old mining operations tied to unresolved fatalities. Nathaniel said nothing when he read it. That night, Beatrice lay awake listening to the wind. She thought of the town she'd left behind, of men who had laughed as she was sold, of a father who had accepted gold in exchange for silence. "They're going to try to take this from us," she said softly into the dark. "Yes," Nathaniel replied. "And you?" "I'll stand," he said, "but I won't chain you here." She turned toward him. "Do you think I don't know how to leave?" "I think you deserve the option." She considered that. "Then listen carefully," she said. "I didn't survive Ashford just to be quietly removed again. If they want a fight, they'll get one." Morning brought visitors. This time they dismounted. A marshal, a lawyer, and Martin Hendricks. Beatrice stepped outside before Nathaniel could stop her. Her father looked smaller than she remembered, older. His eyes flicked to the cabin, to Nathaniel, to the land stretching behind them. "Beatrice," he began. "You look well. Say what you came to say," she replied. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Crow, we're here to discuss concerns regarding your consent at the time of marriage." "My consent," she echoed. You were exchanged for money, the marshal said. That raises questions. It raises questions about my father, Beatrice said coldly, not about me. Nathaniel stepped forward then, mask in place. If you're here to accuse, he said, do it plainly. The lawyer smiled thinly. We're here to ensure no crime has been committed. And if we refuse to entertain this, Beatrice asked, then the court will decide, the marshal replied, in Ashford. Silence followed. Nathaniel's hand hovered near hers, not gripping, not pulling, waiting. Beatrice looked at the men before her, at her father, who still could not meet her eyes. We'll come, she said, and we'll tell the truth. Nathaniel turned sharply. Beatrice? No, she said quietly. They dragged us into this. We finish it. Her father exhaled in relief. Too much relief. That night, Nathaniel paced the cabin like a caged animal. They'll see my face, he said. They'll decide before I speak. Then let them, Beatrice replied. They've always decided about me before listening, too. She stepped in front of him, hands steady as she untied the leather straps of his mask. He froze. I'm not asking, she said gently. I'm reminding you. You're not ashamed here. The mask came away. She kissed the scarred side of his face without hesitation. Tomorrow, she said, we stop hiding. Outside, the mountain stood silent. Inside, two people the world had labeled disposable, prepared to stand where they had never been allowed before. When happiness is found by those who were never meant to have it, the world often calls it a mistake. And so, it sends the past to collect a debt that was never owed. Ashford had never seen a day like it. By the time Beatrice and Nathaniel's wagon crested the final hill, the town square was already full. People leaned out of windows. Men stood in clusters near the courthouse steps. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Children were pulled close, warned not to stare, and stared anyway. The monster is coming, someone murmured. Nathaniel sat rigid beside Beatrice, reins steady in his hands. He had not put the mask back on. The wind cut across the square, sharp and cold, lifting dust and paper. When the wagon stopped, silence spread in widening ripples. Beatrice stepped down first. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. Her body filled space the way it always had, solid, undeniable. Heads turned. A few snickers rose and died quickly. Then Nathaniel climbed down. The scars were worse in daylight. There was no shadow to soften them. The damage was undeniable, confronting, impossible to ignore. A woman gasped. A man swore under his breath. Someone laughed, high, nervous, cruel. Beatrice moved instantly, placing herself half a step up in front of Nathaniel without touching him, not to hide him, to stand with him. Order! The marshal barked, rapping his baton against the courthouse rail. This is a hearing, not a circus. The irony did not go unnoticed. Inside, the courtroom overflowed. People pressed against the walls, craned their necks from the doorway. Nathaniel felt every stare like heat on raw skin, but he did not flinch. He kept his eyes forward. Beatrice took his hand. The lawyer spoke first. He spoke smoothly, confidently. He spoke of money exchanged, of isolation, of power imbalance, of a dangerous man with a violent past who had purchased a woman no one else wanted. She was coerced by circumstance, the lawyer concluded, and now she is too afraid or too loyal to admit it. Beatrice stood before she was asked. "I am not afraid," she said clearly, "and I am not loyal out of weakness." Murmurs rippled through the room. She turned slowly, letting them all see her, letting them take in her size, her presence, her refusal to shrink. "I was unwanted long before I met my husband," she continued. "Not because I was cruel or lazy or immoral, but because my body offended people who believed women should be smaller, quieter, and grateful for scraps." Her father shifted uncomfortably. "You sold me," Beatrice said, looking directly at him now. "You took money because you believed I was worth less than your farm. That was your choice. Marrying Nathaniel was mine." The lawyer scoffed. "You expect us to believe this man did not manipulate?" Nathaniel stepped forward then. "I will not deny my past," he said. His voice was low but carried. "Men died in my mind. That will haunt me until I die. But I did not lure this woman. I did not threaten her. I did not trap her." He swallowed once. "I paid money because the world had taught her family she was disposable. I thought money was the only language they spoke." A hush fell. "And what did you buy?" the judge asked. Nathaniel met her gaze. "A chance not to be alone, and a partner who chose to stay when she was free to leave." The judge turned to Beatrice. "Were you free to leave?" Beatrice did not answer immediately. She thought of the mountain, the cabin, the bench built to fit her, the hands that never pushed her away. "Yes," she said finally, "and I stayed." Her father stood abruptly. "She's confused. Look at him. Look at what he is." Beatrice turned on him, eyes blazing. "No," she said, "look at what you are." Gasps echoed. "You raised me to believe I was a burden. You taught me that love was conditional and dignity negotiable. Nathaniel taught me neither." Silence followed, thick, stunned. The judge leaned back, studying them both. "This court does not exist to enforce prejudice," she said at last, "nor to punish unconventional choices. Mrs. Crowe has spoken clearly. This marriage stands a beat, and any further harassment will be treated as such." The gavel fell. For a moment, no one moved. Then Beatrice exhaled. Outside, the crowd parted slowly as they emerged. Some faces were still hostile, some were thoughtful, a few quietly ashamed. Nathaniel's hand shook once. Beatrice tightened her grip. "You did it," he said hoarsely. "We did," she corrected. They climbed back into the wagon as the town buzzed behind them, no longer laughing, no longer sure. As the horses turned toward the mountain road, Beatrice looked back once. Ashford was smaller than she remembered. True strength is not proven by fists or fire, but by the courage to stand in the open and refuse the lie that you were never meant to be loved. The road back to Shadow Peak felt longer than the road down, not because of distance, but because everything had changed. The wagon climbed steadily, wheels biting into familiar ruts, the mountains closing around them like old sentinels. The noise of Ashford faded behind pine and stone, replaced by wind and birdsong. Beatrice sat beside Nathaniel, their shoulders touching, neither speaking. For the first time since leaving the mountain, Nathaniel breathed easily. "They didn't cheer," he said at last. "No," Beatrice replied, "but they didn't chase us either." "That may be the best victory we get." She nodded. "It's enough." They reached the cabin at dusk. Smoke still clung faintly to the chimney from the fire they'd banked before leaving. Snowmelt ran in thin lines down the rocks, catching the last light of day, everything was exactly as they'd left it, and somehow entirely new. Nathaniel stopped at the door. "This is where it ends," he said quietly. "If you want it to." Beatrice turned to face him. "Ends?" "The fighting," he clarified, "the explaining, the standing in front of crowds who think they get a vote in our lives." He searched her face. "We can stay up here, let the world forget us again." "And would that be hiding?" she asked, "or choosing peace?" He considered the question carefully. "I don't know." Beatrice stepped past him, opened the door, and went inside. The cabin welcomed them with fire scent and familiar stillness. She set down her bag, removed her coat, and moved through the space with confidence earned, not borrowed. "This isn't hiding," she said. "This is home." Nathaniel followed, closing the door behind them. Later that night, they sat by the fire, knees touching. Nathaniel held the mask in his hands, turning it over slowly. "I wore this because I thought the world had already decided what I was," he said. "Today I realized something." "What?" "They decided before they ever saw my face." Beatrice smiled faintly. "So had I." He set the mask on the shelf above the mantel. Not destroyed, not discarded, just set aside. Outside, the mountain wind rose again, not angry this time, but restless, alive. The world beyond Shadow Peak would continue to talk, to judge, to tell the story wrong. But inside the cabin, the fire burned steady. Beatrice leaned her head against Nathaniel's shoulder. "Do you think they'll leave us alone now?" she asked. "No," he said honestly, "but I think they'll think twice." She accepted that. In the morning, Beatrice stepped outside alone. The light was soft, the air cold and clean. She looked out over the land that had witnessed their worst fears and their quiet triumph. She no longer felt the urge to shrink. Nathaniel joined her, wrapping a coat around her shoulders. "You're safe here," he said. She looked up at his eyes shining. "So are you." They stood together, two figures once labeled monstrous, now simply human, rooted in a place that asked nothing of them except honesty and endurance. Behind them, the cabin glowed warm against the cold. Ahead of them, the mountains waited. And somewhere between those two truths, a life, imperfect, hard-earned, and fiercely chosen, continued to unfold. Home is not the absence of storms. Home is the place where you decide, together, to keep the light burning no matter how often the wind returns. Every time a story like this is told, it travels farther than mountains and years. It reaches people who have been called too much, too strange, too broken to be chosen, and reminds them that love has never belonged to the perfect, only to the brave. If this story found you, tell me, where are you listening from in the world right now? And if you still believe that even those the world calls monsters deserve a home, a hand to hold, and a light left on for them, stay with me. The next story is waiting, and it may feel closer than you expect.